Hello everyone and welcome to this live discussion on the future of Chief Information Officers, CIOs, thriving in the era of digital transformation. My name is Joanna Simpson and I'll be your host and moderator today. Aside from moderating, my background is as a news anchor, so I hope to get a greater insight into this topic for you. I'm delighted to say we have a stellar lineup of expert contributors. Please allow me to introduce our panel. Firstly, welcome to Ken Lee, Executive Vice President and Chief Digital and Information Officer at the Joint Commission. The Joint Commission is a US-based non-profit organization which accredits more than 22,000 US healthcare organizations and programs. Thank you for being here, Ken.
Thank you, Joanna. Thanks for having me.
We also have Angela O'Banion, Chief Information Officer at Cook County Health. Cook County Health is one of the largest public health systems in the US, serving more than 600,000 unique individuals. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you.
We also have Carter Sakaria, Chief Digital and Technology Officer at RNL, Ruffalo Noel Levitz. RNL is the leading provider of technology-enabled enrollment and fundraising solutions for higher education and non-profit communities. Thank you for being here, Carter.
Thank you, Joanna. Pleasure to be here.
We also have Katie Markwell, Senior Vice President of Advisory Services at Celerity. Celerity is an advisory services arm of Randstad Technology Group that helps businesses drive digital transformations. Welcome, Katie.
Delighted to be here.
And Francois Pompeo, Vice President of Solutions Delivery at Randstad Technologies Canada. Randstad Technologies Canada are providers of technology staffing and outsourced solutions. Welcome, Francois.
Thank you, Joanna.
There will be an opportunity to ask some audience questions in our Q&A towards the end. So if you do have anything you'd like us to cover, please send them in via the question panel on the right-hand side of your screen in the webinar control panel. Please include your name and company, and if there's a specific panelist your question is directed to, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. Also on the right of your screen, there is a handouts tab where you can access the digital transformation report our discussion today is based on. Now, new research from Randstad reveals a unique opportunity for Chief Information Officers to guide the future direction of their role. Faced with intersecting market dynamics, underlying vulnerabilities, and increased digital buy-in, taking advantage of this inflection point will benefit both the individual and their company. Key to this will be the transition of the CIO position into a more strategic business advisory role, rather than simply servicing the business as technology builders and distributors. So what should CIOs be focusing on to be successful throughout 2023 and beyond? Currently, CIOs have the opportunity to lead the transformation within their organizations. But to do so, they need to assess risks, build close relationships with colleagues, and align on strategy with the wider business. We asked you, our audience, what your greatest digital transformation challenge is, and your top 5 were strategy, change management, modernization, people, and AI. Which leads me on to our panel. Carter, if I may come to you first, please. What are the biggest challenges faced by CIOs today, and what can be done to overcome them?
Thank you, Joanna. There's quite a lot of challenges that all of us as CIOs kind of face, and I'm going to focus on just quick 4 things that at least we as an organization has focused on. The first one for us is insight as a service. This is trying to kind of work on preparing your data pipeline to be able to train your AI models so they can actually get the prescriptive approach that you can get for your business. Second is going to be digital value drivers, where how we can actually help our organization to kind of pursue new opportunities. And the key there is going to be how do you prioritize them as well, because there's so many new opportunities we want to go behind, but prioritizing and focusing on the right thing is going to be key for us to be successful. Next one is kind of mitigating some of the new organizational risks that keep kind of emerging with the new ransomware pieces that's coming along. And then last but not the least is kind of shaping your organization to have a very significant focus on customer experience. So at least those are the 4 key areas that, at least as a CIO, that I'm kind of facing challenges right now within my organization.
So Kada, you mentioned 4 main challenges there. And Angela, as a CIO yourself, what do you see as the biggest challenges?
Well, as was stated before, there are many. The 2 that I'd like to focus on are interconnected and also connected to futures questions that we'll be talking about related to talent. Cybersecurity vulnerabilities is indeed at the top of my list as the CIO of a healthcare entity. Not that everyone else's data isn't critical, but next to financial information, healthcare information is highly desirable in the dark web, and I won't go into all the statistics on the value of that data. Which leads to, I know that technologically we as organizations have the capabilities to address these vulnerabilities, but it is increasingly more difficult to have the staff on hand to do it. So our partnerships with external providers is critical in the cybersecurity space. It is nearly impossible to have the continuous training and continuous upgrades that you need to keep your system protected. So our ability to have flexible staffing models, budgets to train the people that do work with us, and managed service partnerships with people whose job it is to only do this are critical. And the addressing the cybersecurity vulnerabilities is a huge impact to us and a critical priority. As I said, not that we don't have the technologies to do so, but being able to have the continuous talent to do so.
And Angela, of course, you mentioned cybersecurity there being one of the critical issues for you. And Ken, if I may start with you this time, how can CIOs like yourself ensure that the technology strategy supports the organizational strategy?
Yeah, so thanks, Joanna. I think the first thing to do is really, it sounds simple, but it might not be, is to break down the silos first. Okay, so the technology strategy should not be developed independently, should not be done in a silo. So they must be developed part and parcel to the business strategy with very tight linkages of how technology could enable the business strategy with the cause and effect as well. And it also requires a clear and well articulation of how the technology strategy support the business strategy. So in other words, the CIO should be able to have the perspectives of best practices, what's out there, show the possibility with technologies. Sometimes the business people, they are focusing on the business drivers. The technology CIO should be able to illustrate, and stretch the imagination with technology, what's possible. It is also very important to demonstrate in clear business terms about the values and articulating the risk and reward associated with those strategy. Better use data. Data tells a good story in a way to illustrate the impact. But all of that requires the fundamental trust and credibility of the IT organization. So with those tight partnership, with those credibility and trust from the business, I think that would be very well orchestrated in terms of both set of strategies.
Ken, you said there that technology strategy shouldn't ever be done in a silo. Katie, how does this work in your organization?
Yes, playing off of that, strategy is set by people. So those silos are made up of people, and to build that trust that Ken was talking about, very important to have ongoing communication and dialogue around what success really looks like. So how can you get a shared understanding of that? And then really look at how can you iterate and experiment to deliver on the value that will differentiate your organization. And I think that helps build some of that trust as you're going through. And there's a phrase we often use, trust is gained in drops and lost in buckets. So making sure that you're able to iterate and continue to grow that, that trust bucket will really get you a seat at the table.
Katie, that's a great phrase. Trust is gained in drops and lost in buckets. I'll have to remember that one. Angela, how can CIOs influence strategic conversations within their organization and use data to drive decision making?
Yes, it is. I love this question. It's one that when I saw the question, I thought, oh, well, I guess there are still some CIOs who aren't at the table, or the question wouldn't be being asked. And we're fortunate in our organization that the CIO is a strategic partner with the CEO, the Chief Strategy Officer. And the way you do that is, if you are not already at the table, then you have to get yourself there. It is not possible to be effective in this role without doing so. And when we announce our strategy pillars, our 3-year strategic plan, because we're a public entity, we have public forums, etc., lots of town halls. I'm always there in the beginning when we're crafting the strategy and looking at the marketplace. I am there with the Chief Strategy Officer, and we're talking at a high level whether or not technologically we can do some of the things, or what are some of the key technology drivers. And then we actually create programs and projects and initiatives that include not only people, processes, human resources, operational changes, new equipment, but the technology that needs to be there as drivers. There are critical organizational committees that you need to ensure that you're on, contracts oversights, so that you as business leaders are asking about certain things to do. You're there from the beginning. We have a board that approves, a committee that approves new service lines. In other organizations, that'd be new business development opportunities. We're there from the beginning because we don't want to be the bottleneck for strategic items that have been put before investors or patients or whatever. And our relationships with my relationship with those executives is very intricately linked. There's no strategic strategy, new business line discussions that I am not part of. And if they are, they're happening in secret, and I will find out.
Well, Angela, it sounds like you certainly do have a seat at the table, which clearly is key to all this. And Francois, how can data drive these sorts of decisions?
Sure, I'll answer a little bit more as a supporting role for data, how to use it, right? Because most organizations, if not all, are sitting on lines of data. There's data. You have systems that log data every day, every second. And very often the focus is on the presentation layer. Get some reports, get some dashboards. And when we talk about a data strategy to support the business, I would recommend is really to look at the full pipeline, starting with the ingestion to the storage and to the presentation. Very often we overlook the ingestion. We say, okay, we'll go and grab the data and present it, get Power BI up and running, and all that kind of stuff. But the underlying situation might not be as favorable to get to the data. And a lot of organizations have a lot of data, but struggle to make meaning out of it. And as far as all my experience in data right now has shown that focus on the inputs and the storage really then makes the presentation for data decisions a lot more sound.
And Francois, as you said there, you recommended to look at the full pipeline there when obviously using data to drive your company forward. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Just a reminder that you, our audience, can join in directly with the discussion by sending in any questions you may have via the question panel on the right-hand side of your screen, and that's in the webinar control panel. CIOs cite a lack of skills as the biggest hindrance to digital transformation. It can be tempting to simply replace outgoing talent like for like when recruiting, but CIOs also need to keep an eye on the future. As talent change, how do CIOs build a workforce fit for the future? Ken, if I may come to you first, please. how can you identify the skills your organization will need in the future?
Yeah, so first of all, the skill in an IT organization must be able to meet the expectations and the challenges set out, from a business strategy perspective. It's not so much about what's hot out there and what are these shiny objects out there. Those will be very interesting to keep an eye on, but at the end of the day, it's about whether IT can support, enable the business strategy. So so the formulation of the skill set is really needs to be based on the implication of the business strategy, and which will help define what are the current skills that you need and what are some of the emerging skills that you need to be prepared to acquire. And the CIO also should be keeping an eye, as I said earlier, about what are these emerging technology trends, what are some of the best practices, what are the emerging requirements, so that you can think ahead of the current demand, not so far ahead, maybe a few steps ahead, so that you can think about how do you source and how do you develop those skills internally, or even leveraging some of the partnership.
So Ken, don't get distracted by the shiny objects that are out there, as you said. Francois, how can you future-proof your workforce?
Well, to piggyback on not chasing the shiny object, to get the focus, we talked about the roadmap earlier. The sounder the roadmap, the better the focus, right? In other words, if you have a roadmap over the next 5 years, then you can look at the skills you'll need to get that roadmap executed with the future in mind, right? So if you know that the roadmap includes data, includes much better customer experience, then your lookout in the industry for best practices for governance will map to your roadmap. Because you're right, if you chase shiny objects with the loss of sight to your roadmap, then you probably will do a great thing, but not the right thing. So, which is always a concern when we're putting out some strategies. Another thing, obviously, in organizations, what I've lived through is very often I'll get distracted by hard skills versus non-hard skills. So, future-proofing your organization is a lot about the right people rather than the right skills. That's another one. And then as leaders in technology, fostering the growth mindset, right? It's a commonly used theme, but I'll use it, at least for real for now, which is just to make sure you've got the environment to make sure your people have that curiosity, that thirst to go and get to these skills. So then that's kind of, it doesn't fix itself, but it actually fuels the forward-looking skills by having people interested in these forward-looking situations. Yeah.
And Angela, Francois mentioned there how it's about the right people rather than the right skills. How do you use talent models and training to manage your workforce and adapt to changing demands such as AI?
As I said earlier, the talent management is very challenging in today's environment. We've always said in technology that the skills required move rapidly because of changing technologies moving rapidly. And it just seems to be getting more and more fast-paced, that you can find yourself not necessarily with an entirely obsolete workforce, but with a workforce that is not yet able to do some of the things that we need in AI or cybersecurity. The way that I manage that, or a way for managing that, is you're always going to have legacy, and legacy isn't old, it's just not the newest thing, applications, etc. But you can use your external providers to partner with your existing staff and simultaneously work together so that your staff can get to where they need to be. It's not easy and it's not quick. And it's not easy because it's easier to just have an outside firm do something that your team doesn't know how to do. But eventually, that technology, whatever it is, ChatGPT or other AI solutions, will be replaced by the new thing. And you still have to maintain what is now legacy ChatGPT in my example. So you must make sure that your staff is capable of implementing, managing, and continuing to improve whatever technology platform you're on now. Otherwise, you will never have a core set of people who knows how to do anything. You're always going to be chasing. We don't turn around systems and platforms as quickly as they come on board, right? We still, as developers, have to, the systems take sometimes a year or 2 or 3 years to develop. And by then we find ourselves at the, potentially at the peak of a technology that was new a few years ago, and it's about to be going. So there is a very delicate balance. I do also think that it's important that your team knows, your team, that your staff knows that they're valued at all times, even when there is new technology. And the way to do that is when you're doing new initiatives, enhancements, major strategic changes in technology, your current staff has to be leading those programs. Otherwise, they will begin to think that every time there's something new, it's going to be a consultant. And you cannot have that type of mentality, or your turnover will be unmanageable. But the other thing I want to say from a skills perspective is that our leaders, the people that we serve, are also more technologically advanced. They will come to you, Angela, can I have this technology or that technology? So they expect us to be able to deliver, and they don't want to hear us say, we don't have anyone on our team that can do that. So you must develop with your supply chain, your human resources, vendor management. I won't call them open contracts, but I'll call them arrangements where you can quickly bring staff on board to be able to augment your staff.
Thank you, Angela. And Ken, Angela was mentioning there about how the skills required are moving rapidly because technology is moving so quickly as well. So what do you look for regarding future skills?
Well, for the future skill, again, it should be, based on, a well-articulated, formulated business strategy. And in my area, we are focusing a lot on the data analytics side, okay? Data science, artificial intelligence, machine learning, large language programming. Really is looking to do more predictive rather than reactive type of solutions. And it is very important because when you are waiting for things to happen and you react to it, you're a few steps behind the curve. So that's an area that we really are looking to shore up. And again, sometimes it's very difficult to scale, within a very short time. You may not be able to acquire the resources and the technical skill internally, so you might have to partner with vendors, with a partner. So those are some of the areas that we're focusing on to beef up our emerging skills.
Ken, predictive rather than reactive is a very difficult balance to strike there, but obviously you're working hard on that. And Carla, both Angela and Ken sort of touched on it a bit there. How can you ensure that internal talent has a chance to evolve and develop? Angela mentioned that they really need to feel that they are part of the solution.
Absolutely, right, and I agree with Angela on that, because internal talent has a lot of institutional knowledge which we need to be able to kind of leverage and use as much as we can. And so the key things, at least my areas of focus has been, as far as talent management internally, is focus on coaching and learning, right? So that's a key piece that you can actually help your employees feel valued, but also give them an opportunity to be able to learn some of the new and emerging skills that's coming in. One of the, at least there's multiple ways, and I'll give you a few of the ones that we've been using here. First one is like you always identify change champions, like who are actually early adopters in some of the technologies, and have them basically, be a change champion to kind of help drive some of the coaching process. And this might sound silly, but like I have this program that I've set it up called Technology Show and Tell. So we actually set it up for all our technology people, but it's not only for technology, we actually invite the entire organization to kind of attend, right? Like either both at the leadership level, business level to be able to join. And we can actually start having some of these change champions kind of doing some showcases. Two things that comes out of it, at least from my perspective. So one is you're able to kind of showcase what some of the emerging tech is, how that can fit into the business model. But it also helps, like when I see a lot of technology folks are very shy and you want to bring them into the limelight. So you actually give them a safe and sound opportunity for them to kind of basically build up on some of their soft skills as well. So that's one area that, has been very successful. And second area that Kenneth kind of alluded to is trying to drive some partnership with some of the vendors who are actually, have these technology or the skill set that's required based on some of this emerging technology. And we have a concept called Innovation Lab. So we actually created one which is offsetting with some internal people along with our external vendors combined to that together. So you can actually do some of proof of concept, kind of looking at how and what is needed for your business in a safe environment to be able to build that out. And then third, but not the least, that I actually encourage, my internal employees is to kind of start going and attending conferences, but not being just an attendee, but become a speaker, become, a specialist to kind of showcase what we are doing as technologists within our organization as well. So those are the three areas of focus, at least I'm doing. I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, but these three have been pretty successful in our environment.
Carter, the Technology Show and Tell sounds like the ideal platform, really, to give people the right sort of exposure or sunlight, as it were. And Ken, what opportunities are there for development where you are?
Yeah, so I would start with the more foundational process, which is we all should be doing, and we should be taking it all seriously about the appraisal process, performance appraisal process, which we should do it regularly, consistently, and accurately to reflect the strength, areas of improvement, and what the development needs are for the employees. And also a feedback about what you as a manager could do better to support that as well. So we have a program, what we call it the 3E program. Okay, 3 E's representing the education, experience, and exposure. So education is pretty straightforward. Okay, you go and take a class, certification, training, that kind of development work. And then the experience is really important. Is how do you identify the right people, the right staff, resources, matching them with projects or other initiatives that would enhance their experience, that would enhance the hands-on learning about certain areas. And the exposure is also important from my mind is, let's put the staff in front of senior executives for them to get some visibility, for them to be able to articulate, their own ideas, their thoughts, so that, they get used to cultivating and presenting the ideas in a way that, will be productive. So those are very important elements, and the individual development plan is not something that you develop once a year, you put it on the side and never look back. It has to be reviewed. It has to have some objectives, some tracking, some measurements, so that we can see that, hey, it is really making the right impact from an internal development perspective.
Ken, you mentioned their education, experience, and exposure, but also not to forget the tools that we already have available, such as the appraisals process, which obviously can be expanded and used to help current employees very successfully. And just a reminder to please keep those audience questions coming in via the question panel on the right. We've had some great ones so far, so we'll get to those towards the end of the program today. Staying ahead of the curve is difficult for any single organization to do alone. By working with external companies, building partner ecosystems can help CIOs engineer and implement a strategy fit for the future. But how can they create a network that helps their organization forge a new path? Carter, if I may come to you first, please. How do you identify which areas would benefit most from a partnership approach?
So there's multiple factors in kind of, building partnerships. So there's two areas of focus, at least I've been focused on. One is data partnership, where we can actually enrich data, across, so we can actually have a much more better, stronger analytics that we can come out of it. So that's more business need driven. And the second is technology partnership, right? Like finding the right partner, vendor partner to kind of help drive and offset what Angela, Ken were talking about. So that's a key areas of focus. So within that vendor partnership, what I like to kind of find is first is cultural fit, right? Like, so that is an important part for us to kind of have somebody who can actually partner pretty well with not only with the leadership, but across the organization all the way to the grassroots, so that we can actually be successful together. Second, I know like Katie had mentioned this, like is the co-creation model, right? Like somebody who is willing to co-create, knowledge and IP together with us. So that is a joint ownership that we can actually do, which is going to be important for us to build. And then the third area of focus is thought leadership, right? Like, what kind of thought leadership that they have and how they can actually bring in, because the point of partnership is to kind of offset things that we are lacking within the organization. So somebody who has the right thought leadership to bring it in and kind of offset is a pretty significant, at least for me, a criteria in kind of selecting the right vendor partner.
So Ken, Carter mentioned there that there are two main areas for him, with the data partnership and the technology partnership. What do you look for when seeing which areas would benefit from this approach?
Yeah, so I was also start with making an assessment evaluation about, is the internal organization able to meet these expectations or demand? And when I talk about this, is also in the framework of the time required to get there, right? So sometimes it's not possible or too slow to scale up your skill to support certain demand and expectations. Maybe sometimes it's too costly to build it. Maybe it's more of a one-time thing. It's not a repeating type of initiative. So those are some of the areas that we will have to make a determination and say, is it better to serve those by our internal resources, or is it better to partner with an external partner? And that kind of come into what are the core competency that you need to make sure that you build and retain and sustained within your organization. Okay, and those are the ones that you cannot only rely on the partners. You have to maybe start with a partner if you don't have the resources, but there must be a knowledge transfer. There must be some kind of learning along the way, so that your internal organization can be more and more capable to support those. And then other areas like the standard maintenance work, operational work, support type of work we all have to do, even though we want to do all this wonderful new initiative, but we still have to keep the lights on. So maybe those can be automated, maybe those can be leveraged with a partner, so that the internal resources can focus more on the more emerging type of needs.
And Katie, a critical question next, which Ken has sort of touched on a bit there. How do you decide who to partner with?
I think it really is about determining ultimately that fit and looking for partners and team members that are flexible in their approach. And that is everything from how you're designing or tailoring the solution to make sure that it's a cultural fit, or it's aligned with the risk or the change readiness that's available in an organization, all the way through to if you're faced with something, as we all know, something always happens. And so will the partner really be there to help you through that particular situation? as Cotter was mentioning before, I do absolutely agree that partners are there to co-create success. And so making sure that those, again, the success metrics are defined, but also that you're acting as a guide through the process that helps with the teaching, the transition. Ultimately, anything you do in an organization as a partner, you really want to live on. If you deliver a report and walk away, typically nothing changes, right? And so you really want to see what are those linkages, how are you helping the organization and helping its leaders really manage through that transformation.
So Katie, you mentioned there to find the best partner that aligns most with your organisation. And Francois, Katie touched on it there as well. Once you've made that selection, how can you ensure success within a partnership?
Well, that's the holy grail. What I would say, there's a few things that I strive for as a partner, is to really make sure that the organization and our organization have matching value propositions. A partner will have multiple value propositions. It might be an expertise-driven value prop. It might be a cost value prop. It might be a global presence value prop. And it also will be a flexibility or engagement modeling value prop. And typically, it'll be a mix and match of all of those various value props. But to make sure that your partner really has that mission in its core of these value props that matches what you're looking for is really important. If you're looking for cost, or if you're looking for expertise, and one is driving more than the other, then your success might not be as within reach. What I would also recommend is what is your value prop to the partner, because as a partner we look for not only revenue. I mean, hopefully most of the lead partners will look for much more than profitability and revenue. They'll look for referenceability. They'll look for growth into strategic areas, co-creation, as Katie was mentioning. So understanding what you're providing beyond revenue to your partner is really, really, really important, because if you do this transparently, and if you're doing this over the years, then it becomes a much more mutually beneficial relationship than strictly on revenue and exchange of a transaction. So going back, and also with regards to transaction, is if you can evolve your partnership beyond a transaction, the better. If you have a partner that is unexpectedly present in times of need, right? Whether it be support, whether it be scaling up, scaling down, and their presence is strong and trustable, that's also extremely important. Yeah, that's what I would.
Francois, as you said there, that it's not only a symbiotic relationship, but also one way where you need to be able to rely upon that partner through all different sorts of circumstances, which you won't necessarily be able to predict at the outset. And Angela, what do you feel is key to success?
The great thing about the panelists that we have is, and it makes you feel great when someone answers the question the way you were going to answer it. That's the great thing. The other thing is you have to quickly shift because the person said what you were going to say. But I have to leverage something that Francois said that was going to be a key component of my response, which is you have to be in a relationship with your partner. You have to be willing to understand that the reason you brought them on board is because they might know something that you haven't looked at. And so that willingness to say that they may be right and you may not be as right as you thought you were, because the data that, and most of the time partners will start with data more so, in my experience, than internally. Because they are going to have, partners are going to have specific service level agreements and deliverables, they are often in the beginning looking for proof that what you have asked them to do is something that is meaningful and that can be achieved. And often they will start with the data to say to you, I know this is what you want to do, but the market is saying otherwise, along those lines. So you have to be willing that the partner may sometimes have better information than you coming in. The other thing is you have to pick a partner. This is very close to what Francois said. I was just going to say it a little differently, whose bread and butter is what it is that you are aspiring to. So in the case of a program that we're working on where we will be doing some very revolutionary service models in on-demand virtual care, then we need to find a partner who is has proven success in customer-based models with mobile apps and digital transformation. I have a PC refresh. I need a different type of partner for that. I need someone who's focused on operational excellence and efficiency. And this sounds obvious, but most partners will tell you they can do everything, and many of them can, but you cannot choose a partner whose area of expertise is not what it is that you need. And when you're dealing with multifaceted organizations, some of the largest partners, you may know that partner from some work that they did in one particular area, but that's not the team from that organization that you need to do the other work. And so having a partner who is willing to go inside their organization and be willing to potentially give up some work for another division of the organization that can do it better, that takes a true partner, because the revenue is involved, claim to fame is involved. So the partner must be willing to be in a relationship with you that sometimes causes them to not always win as much as they could in their own individual practice, but organizationally they still get the work. And I've been, I think a lot of us have probably had some experiences where we've been partnering with the wrong part of the organization.
Well, Angela, a lot of great points there that you raise, including the fact that partners can actually shape your approach to how you access them. Now we've got some audience questions that have come in, some really great ones here. Actually, this first one is back to you again, Angela. This is from Joe Lociero, who asks you, regarding your comments on ongoing skills and knowledge development, is there a certain benchmark budgeted towards this area? For example, certain percentage basis points of top line revenue, for example, understanding scale and scope of each company may drive financial capacity and limitation.
I think I understand the question as it relates to talent and skill, possibly because there was a concern earlier in the slides that maybe there's not enough budget to fund some of the talent. But I'll take the question from this perspective. I don't think that there's a direct correlation between I want to grow my business by 50%, therefore there's a model that says that people need X number of hours of training or they need this much development. I don't think that there's I'm not saying there shouldn't be, but there is not a direct correlation between talent and skill management with respect to revenue generation. Not necessarily for the technology team. I do think of obviously for other parts of the organization, sales, etc. Then obviously that is the case. But I think that for technology, I would not say. Where I do think there is a correlation between technology and a top level measure for the organization is pace. And by that I mean that if your organization is an organization that is rapidly developing new products, that they are a leader as opposed to a fast follower, I do think that your supporting organizations need to mirror that. If you are a growth and innovative company, you cannot have an IT organization that is primarily focused on keeping the lights on. Because what happens in that case is those business units will find the IT people that can match their strategic thrust, for lack of a better word. If you are an organization that is very operationally efficient, you are primarily, you make the things that other people use and you're not necessarily at the front line, then you're going to be miserable if you have an IT organization with people who are very interested in innovation and development. So in those cases, I do think that pace matters.
Thank you very much for that, Angela. And this next question is to Carter, Kin, and Francois. It seems that at many companies, when there's a new technology being introduced, where there's a lack of in-house experience, instead of training current staff, the go-to is to outsource or bring in consultants. Do you see a shift where IT organizations will instead invest in their own staff to learn these new long-term skills? Carter, may I start with you, please?
Sure. That's a great question. It all depends upon whether what we are trying to do is core to our business or not, right? Anything that is core to our business, it's always good to kind of have your employees, trained and offset it, like as Francois was talking about, offset it with a trusted, a vendor partner, be able to have a trusted vendor partner offset that skills. And as Ken was mentioning as well, for a certain period of time, right? Trying to bring the talent up into your internal team as much as possible. Now, as far as non-core areas is concerned, one of the things that I always like to consider is managed services or type of outsourcing that has a very specific KPI with at least a rider that at some point in time, it's almost rehabilitate and return that process back. And as Ken had mentioned this before as well, we're kind of looking at some of these non-core business, automate as much as we can and be able to bring. So that's why finding a right business partner or like a vendor partner to be able to do that and bring it back is going to be important.
Thank you very much for that. And Kim, what was your response?
Yeah, very similar to what Carter just said, and I want to reiterate that, an IT organization working with the business has to make a determination about what are your core competency and what are your core skill set that you must be proficient at internally to support the business strategy. And if you identify those, the challenges could be that you couldn't scale up fast enough to meet the demand. And you couldn't source those resources fast enough to execute the work. So in those cases, I also mentioned earlier is, okay, it's nothing wrong with, working with a partner who have those skill set readily available. However, we want to make sure that, there would be a transition from partner to internal in terms of learning curve, in terms of knowledge transfer, in terms of shadowing the work, so that internal organization can develop and retain those skill set after the project is done, and then continue to build upon that. I think that would be very important.
Thank you, Kin. And Francois, what would you like to add?
Thank you, Joanna. To use Kin and Carter's concept of core technologies, right? The ones you want to keep and grow, and because it's close to the business strategy and roadmap. I would say that the partner ecosystem is exploring new model. And by that I mean ways to engage with our customers that enable them for future proofing. In other words, hybrid, right? You said, Kin, in other words, you bring a team in where you mix and match, depending on criticality, obviously. If there's a time issue, then you get flexible a bit, but it's a balancing act. But assuming that you can plan this out, bringing partners that allow for that flexibility for hybrid workforces that bring knowledge in through what I call osmosis learning, where somebody is shadowing, whether somebody is working within the environment of the consulting group or the partner. Another one is partners are looking into building up workforces for a customer, whether it be a squad, a pod, or wherever. And then there's openness now to transfer that knowledge, whether it be hiring some of the consultants that have worked on it. So there's new models to engage with firms to collectively help on the knowledge topic, because scarcity and knowledge scarcity is an issue for all. So I think there's new ways to engage with partners that safeguard exactly that core competency. And I think that was the original question, which is how do we make sure that we as employees and non-consultants can gain and have access to that knowledge so that we stay current to the market, we stay current with the current knowledge. Yeah, I would encourage pushing your partners to these new models that enable that.
Thank you, Francois. That was great. And this question to Carda, please. How do you select vendors? As a CIO, do you empower individuals to explore new vendors on their own initiative, or does the initiative come from you? And how many vendor evaluations do you have running at any one time?
That's a good question. One of the biggest things that, at least the framework that I use, is like when we are looking at vendors, Ken was mentioning this as well, you need to look at least 2 to 3 vendors that can actually bring into your mix for to offset what we are actually trying to find. And the key is kind of trying to have a very clear evaluation criteria, how you want to evaluate. As I mentioned before, we look at like cultural fit, we look at co-creation, we look at type of thought leadership, and those are some of the key criteria that goes in. And obviously there's a lot of financial leadership and all that stuff that we look at, but that's some of the core pieces that we look at from a vendor perspective before we start evaluating. I actually always like a champion challenger kind of an approach, which kind of keeps a healthier competition within some of the vendor partners to kind of create the value that we are trying to get out of. Because single sourcing model is good for certain type of business, but at least the business that I always kind of been having very good success is having the champion challenger. Francois mentioned this to kind of touch upon the point on the partnership and vendors. The key criteria that some of the new business model Francois was talking about, one of the models that we actually explored and are actually doing it is we actually let our vendor partner hire our employees and basically take that as a managed services area to kind of create that upskilling and talent in their environment. And then over a period of next 3 years, we can actually hire 75% of those employees back into our company as well. So that's how we actually created a model that, where, you have people kind of going into the new emerging technology, the new type of culture that you want your employees to get into, and then you actually bring them back into the organization with a very clear set of timeline attached to it. It also becomes an important factor in how you actually build that vendor kind of in analysis as well.
Thank you, Carda. Now, we've had so many great questions coming in that Randstad will be aiming to respond to some of the others after this webinar. We will shortly be bringing this discussion to a close, but before we go, I have a final question for the whole panel. If you could briefly give one piece of advice to other technology leaders, what would it be? And Ken, would you start, please?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I would start with saying that, the CIOs are only going to be as good as the people within the organization who would be able to execute on the vision and the strategy. So I would encourage the technology leaders, CIO, CTO, etc., to focus on people development. Okay, focus on building a learning and agile organization with capable resources that can be trusted to carry out the expectations. So the people equation, the technology side actually could be a little bit easier compared to the people dynamic versus the process side as well. So people is the main focus.
So CIOs are only as good as their people. And Angela, what would your advice be?
It's very difficult, but I would say that my advice to CIOs is run towards the leader of today who has grown up with advanced technologies and who has many ideas about his or her business resists the urge to quiet those leaders who are telling you to use this technology or use that technology, or have you thought about that technology? In the past, we have considered ourselves to be the experts in technology, and we still are and are expected to be. But we cannot deny that we are now upon a generation of leaders whose first device was a computerized device and not necessarily a book and a pad of paper. That is a different type of leader that is now our customer. And we need to, we may not run fast towards it, but we need to embrace it. And it will make for a much more powerful, technologically advanced organization.
So it's important to keep listening. And Carter, what would your response be?
I echo both Ken and Angela's, but my biggest thing that I'm kind of looking at it is becoming a business leader with a deep technology expertise, right? Once you've become one of them, then people are willing to listen to you, right? Once you become one of those business leader who understands business to the level they are, there's a lot of trust that gets built with you, and they are willing to negotiate. They're willing to talk to you more about what they are looking for, right? And then they'll start considering you as a business leader with deep technology expertise. Then you can start driving your technology strategy with the business alignment. So I would say, try becoming the business leader, right? I think that's one piece of advice I can give.
Become the business leader. And Katie, what would you like to say?
I think transformation is about change, just on repeat. And to do that, it's really about how do you captivate both the heart and the mind of an organization. And I think continuing to invest in technology, people, as we have been talking about, but also make equal investments in change management, processes, training for your teams, because that's just as important to getting something across the finish line. So I would say captivate heart and mind, and continue to communicate what your vision is over and over and over, and then one more time.
And change on repeat. And Francois, what advice do you have?
Well, there's a lot of great advice that has been given. So at the risk of sounding overly simplistic, is to be enthusiastically curious. What I mean by that a little bit more is that the first question was how to be strategic, right? And we had a run at this earlier this week, and one of the things that we were talking about is to become a business partner. We always say this, but also be an SME of the business you're helping, right? Really understand what the business is, understand the clients, understand the processes, understand the legal, the finance, not necessarily be the expert, but understand and make technology almost an afterthought, almost. So yeah, enthusiastically curious at the risk of being overly simplistic.
Well, today we've gained a real insight into the opportunity available for changing the role of CIOs. As Angela said at the beginning, if you're not at the table, get yourself there. It's clearly an exciting time with CIOs having the power to direct their destiny. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion, and a reminder that the full digital transformation report is on the right of your screen under the handouts tab. And I'd like to thank all of our contributors today, Angela, Ken, Katie, Carter and Francois. Thank you very much for sharing your specialist knowledge. And finally, I'd like to thank you, our audience, for joining in and providing such great questions. That's all for this session. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.